Kia ora, and welcome to week 10 of fiction writing. So we're getting down to the last segment of the course now, sadly, the very last lap. As we do so, many of you maybe begin thinking about your third story, your final assignment for fiction writing. I do encourage you to go into the course guide on the website and check out assignment 3, story 3, new or re-envisioned story. Have a read of that description, and hopefully that should be pretty straightforward. What I'm saying here is a little bit of a summary of that and a little bit supplemental to it, just to sort of guide you into this last assignment. So it's a new or re-envisioned story. So first of all, if you're writing a new story, well, that's pretty straightforward. It can just be a new story, so just a third story. And if that was what was on your mind, just to write something completely different and completely new, that's all good. Go ahead with that plan. That's fine. The third story is hereby taken care of. But there's this other term there that I thought I'd give some time to, called a re-envisioned story. What does that mean, re-envisioned? I didn't use the word revised because I thought that might be a little bit misleading. And as a kind of preface to explaining what I mean by re-envisioned, I'll just briefly go over what I see as the layers of responding to any kind of work. So at the very bottom we have proofing. Proofing is just sort of nothing. It's a final check for spelling, grammar, clarity, all those sorts of things. It's the kind of thing you should do with a post on the forum, with an email, with anything at all. That's not what I mean by re-envisioned in any way. The next level up, sort of level 2, is editing. And editing includes things like rewriting sentences, rethinking that opening paragraph, maybe cutting out a paragraph, maybe even rewriting some images in a story, making a few places a bit more clear, changing some names. Really all that's under editing. And that to me isn't even yet at the first level of revision. So hopefully between your first draft story that you turned in for a workshop and your revised story, you're doing more than just editing. The third level up is what I call sort of first order revision. And oftentimes students don't even get to this sort of first order of revision, so it's good to give it a moment and talk about it. So first order of revision probably would strike you as a holistic revision, but I don't think it's quite holistic. So that first order of revision would be really much as on the table, writing a character in or out of the story, changing the ending, setting it in a new place, probably keeping the emotional center intact, but really rewriting whole paragraphs. That, to my mind, is the first order of revision, and that's the kind of revision that, as I think I mentioned in a previous video, I hope you will do between your draft stories and the final stories that you submit for story 1 and 2. So what do I mean by re-envisioned story? Well, that's what I would call the sort of second level of revision, a very holistic revision. So a re-envisioned story might just be something like this. You think, you know, I really did like that voice on that first story, and I'd like to go back to that voice. I don't like anything that I wrote about. I don't think I knew the emotional center. I don't necessarily like the characters. I didn't think there was enough dialogue in there. The characters didn't say anything at all. So I'd like to give that voice maybe even to another character, or to a character who's a kind of version of the previous character, and completely rewrite that story from scratch. Now, it's not exactly from scratch in terms of the course, because we may have seen the voice before, or the character before, or a version of the character before, but it's re-envisioned, that it's a holistic second order of revision. To give another example, a holistic re-envisioning might include something like, well, I really liked that emotional center that I wrote about in that second story. I thought I was really onto something. I got a little bit distracted by one of my sort of darlings, by a key phrase that probably I should have just cut, or I really thought it should be said on a cruise ship, and in fact it probably should have been said on my street. So I kind of went the wrong way. I went the wrong direction. I went off course. I had everybody die at the end when really they could have all just sort of gone to sleep for the night. Whatever. But there's something about that story that I'd like to return to, something about that emotional center that I think I haven't said, something that's important to me, that I want to revisit again. That's a re-envisioned story. That's a second order of revision. So just returning to material in a very new, very holistic way, but maybe it's material that you've worked with before. And the reason that I'm giving you that option and not just saying it has to be an all-new story is because I think that in any sort of 12 to 14 week period, which is basically what we're dealing with in a semester, we're probably going to want to return to a few core themes, a few core feelings, core voices. We're probably going to be drawing, if you will, on the same emotional reservoir. And so I think it's natural and acceptable to return to some element of your fiction before. And I just want to call the story a re-envisioned story to give you permission to do that if you want to return to that material in some way. It may be that you think you're writing a new story, and in fact, you're re-envisioning an element of the old story. And maybe you don't even realize that until you finish the draft. And that's all perfectly fine and acceptable. So that's a description of that third story. I will post the announcement about this video in the general forum, discussion forum, so that people can respond with more questions if they have them. I don't want you to go into that third assignment with any questions whatsoever, ideally. I hope your second round of workshopping is going well. And I hope this class comes to a very smooth landing for you. Fingers crossed.